Hi, my name is Hannah, and I'm 30 years old. I own and run a fancy steakhouse. Both of my parents were steak chefs, so I grew up watching them cook amazing steaks that always made people happy. Inspired by them, I decided to follow in their footsteps. After years of hard work, I finally became a steakhouse chef, and 3 years ago, I even opened my own steakhouse. It's a great place, not just because of the steaks and wine, but also the atmosphere. Thanks to the skills my parents taught me, like how to cut and cook the meat, our restaurant is really popular. We usually have a long line of people waiting to get in, and it feels so good to see our customers smiling and enjoying their meals. But lately, something's been bothering me. One day, while I was busy cooking in our crowded restaurant, my friend Kimberly, who also works here, pointed out a group of people. It was my mother-in-law, Amanda, along with my husband Kevin's brother and sister. They were making a mess and acting like they knew everything about food. This wasn't the first time they'd been here. But the worst part? After they finished eating, they tried to leave without paying. Matthew, another friend from culinary school who works with me and is also Kimberly's brother, confronted them. My mother-in-law had the nerve to say they don't need to pay because the restaurant belongs to her son's wife. The argument got heated, and in the end, my in-laws left without paying, right in front of other customers. This has been a huge problem for me. My mother-in-law thinks she and her family can eat for free just because I'm married to her son. They've even left without paying before, and now customers are starting to notice. Since that incident, our customer traffic has dropped, and I'm worried about the future of the restaurant I've worked so hard to build. After 2 months of stressing over this, my mother-in-law called me again, asking to reserve the entire restaurant for 20 people. She didn't even let me respond before hanging up. I'm at my wit's end with this situation, and it's making things worse for my business. But I couldn't just ignore a reservation, so I briefed Matthew, Kimberly, and the rest of the staff about the situation. We prepared for the big reservation, and I even contacted someone for help. That night, my mother-in-law showed up at the restaurant with not just my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, but also 17 other relatives. As we served them the meal, including steaks, we kept a close eye on my mother-in-law. At one point, one of the relatives nervously asked her if it was okay to eat at such a fancy place. "Of course, darling. We're family, so it's all you can eat," my mother-in-law replied, completely ignoring my concerns. She even called out to me in the kitchen, saying they didn't need to worry about paying. "If I was going to pay, I'd go to a place with a real chef," she added, encouraging the others to dig in. My uneasy feeling grew stronger. Up until now, I had been hosting them out of respect because they were my husband's family. But causing a scene, offering no apology, and then saying they'd go somewhere else if they had to pay for 20 people. Unbelievable. An hour later, just as I expected, my mother-in-law, now full, said, "I'm stuffed. Let's head back," and tried to leave without paying, laughing with her relatives. I couldn't let this slide. Matthew, Kimberly, and I blocked their path. "Wait a minute, if you're leaving after eating, you need to pay the bill," I said firmly, glaring at her. She just smiled and brushed it off. "What are you talking about? We're family." "And your point is, do you think that's some magic phrase? Normally, you pay for what you eat no matter where you are," I replied. "Well, yes, normally, but think about it. When we come to your house and you feed us, we don't pay, right?" she retorted. "That's true, but where do you think you are now? This isn't a friend or family's home. It's a legitimate restaurant," I continued, holding back my anger. "So what? Whether it's a shop or not, it doesn't change the fact that it's my daughter-in-law's place. Charging money just because the location is different makes no sense," she said, completely dismissing my point. Seeing that she had no intention of changing her attitude, and with everyone, including Matthew, Kimberly, and the other staff members, getting increasingly angry, I decided it was time to reveal the truth I had been hiding. "Amanda, clearly you're not listening. Do you know that right now, I'm single?" I said. My mother-in-law's laughter stopped and her face went blank. My brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and the other relatives were equally stunned. A few seconds later, my mother-in-law burst out laughing again. "What are you even talking about? There's no way Kevin would divorce you without telling me." "It's no lie. We are really divorcing, which means you and I are no longer part of the same family," I explained. "Huh? Then why didn't Kevin say anything until now?" she asked, still in disbelief. "Exactly. Kevin, my now ex-husband, hadn't told you about the divorce. Earlier during dinner, you were complaining about not hearing from him. Well, Kevin didn't want to contact you because you two don't get along. He even told me not to say anything when we were divorcing. He said he'd tell you when the time was right. At this, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and the other relatives were visibly disturbed. That's when Matthew took the opportunity to speak up. That said, your bill comes to $3,000 for all 20 of you. At the mention of $3,000, my mother-in-law and the others were stunned. A wave of shock spread among them. What? There's no way we can pay that on the spot. Why is it $3,000 for a steak dinner that we could have had at home? The nerve. If anyone should stop, it's you. Plus, our steaks aren't the kind you eat at home. We source the meat every morning and maintain it at the right temperature. $3,000 for that is fair, I replied. My mother-in-law tried to laugh it off with a malicious smile, but her relatives gave her awkward glances. Growing more frustrated, Matthew, followed by Kimberly, finally spoke up. As the manager said, we are a steakhouse. We don't offer all-you-can-eat or drink specials, and our prices per item aren't cheap. Right? If you're going to stuff your face like that, you need to pay for it. It's clear the bill would come to $3,000. Hearing this, the relatives quickly turned on my mother-in-law, confronting her with frustration. What's going on? You told us you'd settled everything with the manager, so we didn't need to bring any money, one grumbled, echoing the other's complaints. Seeing their angry faces, my mother-in-law panicked and suddenly lashed out at me. How dare you embarrass me in front of everyone? Should I sue you for defamation? Be my guest, I replied calmly, but before you do, we'll report you for dining and dashing. We'll also discuss your past behavior as fraudulent. What did you just say? She snapped back, confused and increasingly hostile. Her relatives tried to calm her down, but she broke free and grew more aggressive, demanding, "What have you done to Kevin? There must be a reason he wants a divorce. Why are you assuming I'm at fault? Kevin is perfect, he's good at his job and handles household chores. I can't forgive this. You're paying the bill as alimony." Her outrageous claim left everyone, including the staff, stunned. What nonsense is this woman spouting? Matthew and Kimberly muttered, embarrassed for her. Sensing that she wouldn't back down, I decided to lay it all out. I didn't say anything before, but the reason for the divorce is Kevin's infidelity and abusive behavior. My words hit like a lightning bolt. My mother-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and the other relatives were all shocked as I revealed the truth. Kevin, no, my ex-husband, didn't just neglect his job. He stole money from me, money I had saved before our marriage, and spent it partying with multiple women and drinking heavily. He was also emotionally abusive and started accumulating debt without my knowledge. Divorce was my only option. Wait, how much debt are we talking about? One of the relatives asked. Adding everything up, including loans from friends and my own parents, it's about $40,000. My mother-in-law's face went pale. I initially let you all slide with the dining and dashing, thinking it was a one-time thing, but after the fiasco 2 months ago, I can't ignore it anymore. Plus, we booked the entire restaurant today, so if you don't pay, we're in the red. The relatives, now furious, began demanding that my mother-in-law repay them the money they had lent her over the years. My mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and sister-in-law were visibly shocked and confused when suddenly the restaurant door burst open. A man walked in, and my mother-in-law exclaimed, "Owen." It was my father-in-law, Owen, a physical education lecturer at a university in the city. He surveyed the scene, sighed deeply, and then bowed his head to me. "Hannah, it's been a while. I'm really sorry for the mess my foolish wife has caused." "No, Owen, I should apologize for calling you in the middle of your busy day," I responded. That's right. I had reached out to my father-in-law after hearing about my mother-in-law's troubling actions, including reserving the entire restaurant. He promised to come and talk to her as soon as he could. "What are you doing here?" my mother-in-law asked, shocked. "Amanda, show some respect. Even if she's an ex, Hannah has had to put up with our idiotic son," Owen said firmly. "But you told me you'd be late because of work." "Yes, but Hannah called me earlier. I was teaching at the university, so I couldn't leave immediately." He sighed again. "I'm really sorry for dragging you into this, Hannah." "There's no need for you to apologize, Hannah," my father-in-law said as he walked in. "I heard everything while standing at the entrance, so I know the whole situation." He then turned to my mother-in-law. his face stern. Amanda, what's going on? You've been dining and dashing repeatedly, and you almost caused a scene last time. No, you've got it wrong, my mother-in-law stammered. I only have $60 on me right now. $60? Are you kidding me, Amanda? You come to a high-end restaurant and that's all you bring? You can't even pay for a single meal. My father-in-law's anger erupted, and my mother-in-law trembled. After taking a deep breath to calm down, he continued, I heard everything at the entrance. It's not just Kevin who's been acting recklessly. You have too, Amanda. No, it's not like that. The real problem is Hannah. She knew about the divorce and didn't say anything. Enough excuses. He cut her off. Kevin silenced her, and he's the root cause of all this. My father-in-law's booming voice made everyone, including the relatives, the waitstaff, and even Matthew and Kimberly, freeze. Realizing the tension, he cleared his throat and bowed deeply to us. I apologize for the scene and for my foolish wife. I'll cover the bill and the debts my relatives mentioned. Please forgive us. What? You're doing what? My mother-in-law gasped. Ignoring her, my father-in-law turned to me. And regarding the alimony for Kevin's divorce, I'd like to discuss it later. I also bear responsibility for my son's actions. There's no need, I replied. Kevin's existing debts are already taken as alimony, so please don't worry. He bowed deeply again and then turned to my mother-in-law. I said I would cover the costs for now, but you will pay it back later with your own earnings. My mother-in-law, along with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, was utterly shocked. My father-in-law declared that since they had been dining and dashing with her, they were equally guilty. He cut ties with all of them that day. Later, my father-in-law paid the $3,000 for that night's meal, $14,000 for past dining and dashing, and around $10,000 for my mother-in-law's debts to relatives, a total of $27,000. It turned out that some of her debts were due to dining and dashing at my restaurant, but she had also been financially supporting a younger man. When my father-in-law discovered this, he was beyond furious, and their marriage ended in divorce. He also cut ties with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. After being ousted, my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and sister-in-law moved into a cheap apartment in the city. They're now juggling part-time jobs to pay off their debts, working from dawn till dusk. All of them are struggling. My mother-in-law, who had always been a housewife, and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, who relied solely on my father-in-law's income despite having college degrees, are all finding it hard to adapt to their first jobs. They're getting yelled at by younger bosses and colleagues almost every day. On the flip side, things are looking up for me. Friends and relatives who used to come with my mother-in-law are now visiting on their own. And guess what? They're actually paying for their meals. They're thrilled with the quality of the food and service. So in a way, I have to thank my mother-in-law for this one silver lining. The smiles of these satisfied customers keep me, Matthew, Kimberly, and the rest of the staff going strong. As I overhear the conversation, I glance over at my daughter-in-law, Cheryl, who seems completely stunned. Cheryl looks panicked, clutching an apple, her eyes darting between my husband and son as they continue their discussion. I can feel my anger starting to rise. My husband and son wrap up the conversation, making their point clear to Cheryl. When I lock eyes with her, she's trembling, and the apple slips from her hand. Ignoring her distress, I ask firmly, could you call them back? Cheryl, on the verge of tears, dials my husband again. As I listen to the annoyed voices of my husband and son on the other end, I wonder what I should do next. My name is Raina, and I'm 62 years old. I've been managing household chores since I graduated from high school. I met my husband, Oliver, through a family introduction, and we married soon after. We had our son and lived happily. No matter how busy he was, my husband always made time to attend our son Miguel's school events. Miguel was such a sweet child. Even when I was too ill to do housework, he would do his best to help. How are you feeling? Can you eat some chicken soup? He'd ask, his little face full of concern. I had to smile when my husband cautiously brought over a pot of soup one evening, having made it himself after putting our son to bed. Seeing me laugh, my husband joined in, albeit awkwardly. Ever since our son got married, he no longer helps with household chores. But he's good to his wife Cheryl, so I suppose it's okay. Still, sometimes when I'm not feeling well, I find myself craving my husband's chicken soup. I'll never forget the taste of that soup. Lately, I haven't been feeling well, It's probably due to my age, but I've had constant discomfort in my stomach and haven't had much of an appetite. Nowadays, since we're living with my son and his wife, Cheryl handles the cooking and dishwashing while I manage the rest of the household chores. I can't complain since I'm relieved from most of the cumbersome tasks, but recently, I've been feeling feverish and usually lie down on the sofa after finishing the laundry. Just then, my husband walked into the living room. Feeling sluggish, I couldn't get up, so I watched him carefully. Ignoring me, he walked past the sofa, went to the kitchen table, and started making coffee. The strong aroma of freshly brewed coffee made me cough involuntarily. Hearing that, my husband clicked his tongue softly and hurried out of the living room once his coffee was ready. It's sad, but lately he's been so cold towards me, like I'm a burden to him. I can't pinpoint when things started going wrong, but somewhere along the line, this is what we've become. Thinking of how caring he used to be made tears well up in my eyes, and I gently wiped them away with my sleeve. Tonight's dinner is meatloaf, but given my poor health, I opted for chicken soup. I'm fully aware of the hassle it takes to prepare a separate meal for one person, but lately I can't stomach the same food as everyone else. Yet Cheryl, my son's wife, made me chicken soup without a hint of complaint. What a blessing she is to our family. Mom, chicken soup again? Cheryl's gone through the trouble to make a nice dinner. Isn't it rude not to eat it? Miguel said, his tone slightly accusatory. Don't say that, Miguel. I'm sure Reina feels bad enough as it is, Cheryl interjected with a chuckle. I smiled weakly and let her comment slide. Though Cheryl can be blunt at times, she's an excellent cook and very considerate. Today's chicken soup was clearly made with my health in mind. She even added a touch of citrus zest to stimulate my dwindling appetite. As everyone else happily chatted and dug into their meatloaf, I sipped my chicken soup. Suddenly, I paused. The soup tasted strange, almost chemical. At first, I thought it was the wax from the citrus zest, but even after avoiding it, the taste persisted. I couldn't help but furrow my brows, catching my husband's attention, who responded with a stern look. Despite feeling guilty towards Cheryl, something was definitely off. I left most of my plate untouched, and Cheryl noticed. With concern in her voice, she asked, "Didn't it taste good?" Feeling cornered, I lied, saying I wasn't feeling well, and let the moment pass. But deep down, I wondered, what did I do wrong? Days passed, and I began to feel a bit better. Since Cheryl and my son had plans to go out, it was my turn to cook. Eager to finally get out of the house, I decided to go shopping, but my body still felt sluggish, likely from being bedridden due to my recent illness. Thinking it was just a lack of exercise, I chose to walk to the nearby supermarket. While waiting for the traffic light to change, a sudden chill ran through my body and my vision went dark. Instinctively, I squatted down, but soon found myself sweating profusely, unable to move. Passers-by glanced at me curiously as they walked by, but I couldn't get up. I clutched my collar tightly, hearing the distant commotion of people and an approaching ambulance siren until I eventually lost consciousness. When I regained it, I found myself staring at a white ceiling. I was in a hospital room. Apparently, I had collapsed on the way to the store and had been brought in by an ambulance. "Oh, Raina, you're awake." I turned toward the voice and saw Cheryl standing by my bed. I tried to respond, but my body wouldn't cooperate. For a moment, I was overwhelmed with gratitude for Cheryl, who showed no signs of annoyance. But as I looked up to thank her, something about Cheryl's face seemed different, something I couldn't pinpoint, but it scared me. Cheryl didn't notice my discomfort. She took an apple from the fruit basket she had probably brought for me. "Raina, you haven't been eating well lately. It's probably malnutrition. Eat this and get better soon," she said, peeling the apple with a fruit knife. Suddenly, a phone rang. I wondered whose it was for a moment, then realized it was Cheryl's. I knew I shouldn't, but I glanced at the screen. My husband's name was displayed. "Cheryl, your phone's ringing," I said. "Oh yes. Can you put it on speaker?" "My hands are full," she replied, hesitating for a second, but then quickly continuing to peel the apple. Doing as she asked, I answered the phone and pressed the speaker button. "How is she?" My husband's voice came through the speaker. "She just woke up. I'm peeling an apple for her right now," Cheryl responded. "You're conscious again. What stamina you have. What's going on? You're awake already?" My husband continued. From the start, the conversation felt off. Not quite what I expected from people who were supposedly worried about me. My husband and son's words made me uneasy. Didn't expect her to wake up this soon. Did we mess up somehow? My husband asked. Hey Cheryl, you've been skimping on the detergent lately, haven't you? Should we add a bit more detergent? My son chimed in. What on earth are they talking about? I looked over at Cheryl. She was holding the apple, her face pale and trembling. Seeing her expression, it suddenly clicked for me. They've been adding detergent to my meals. Cheryl had been watching my expression change, and finally she dropped the apple she was holding. Meanwhile, the conversation between my husband and son continued unabated. Even if we fix the detergent ratio, maybe just mixing it into the food isn't enough, my son said. Yeah, I'd like that insurance money sooner rather than later. Maybe we should mix it into her drinks next time. It's amazing she hasn't noticed, my husband added. She won't notice. This is someone who doesn't even realize she's despised. My son laughed heartily. As I ended the call, I clenched the bedsheets, biting my lip. How did things turn so dark? Why must I suffer this way at the hands of my husband, son, and even my daughter-in-law? What did I do to deserve this? There were no answers, no matter how much I thought about it. I shot Cheryl a fierce glare. She was trembling, probably never expecting their plot would be revealed like this. Cheryl began to panic, fidgeting with her hands. Seizing the moment, I quickly pulled my cell phone from my bag, opened the recording app, and said, "Call them again." What? Call my husband again? Cheryl stammered, overwhelmed by the urgency in my voice. Now, I insisted, and reluctantly, Cheryl dialed the number. After a few rings, the call connected. What's up, Cheryl? Did she finally kick the bucket? My husband sneered on the other end. I could hear my son casually talking in the background, adding, "Don't worry, we'll split Mom's insurance money evenly. Actually, you'll get a bit more for all your trouble. Yeah, adding detergent to her meals is no small feat. You deserve it." They both laughed heartily before hanging up. I stopped the recording and glared at Cheryl. Realizing she was cornered, she weakly lowered her arms and looked up at the ceiling, accepting her fate. I grabbed Cheryl by the shoulders and pressed her for answers. With nowhere to turn, she finally broke down and confessed everything. She revealed that my husband and son had become addicted to gambling, often going out together, but their constant losses led them into deep debt. Desperate, they concocted a plan to take out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, hoping to collect the payout. This sinister plan had been in motion for 2 years. They realized the quickest way to ensure an insurance payout was if I became ill. So they devised a scheme to slowly poison me by mixing detergent into my food. Cheryl explained that around 2 years ago, she suddenly took over meal preparation. At first, I offered to help, but Cheryl strongly refused, insisting on doing it all herself. Now I understood why. If I had been involved in preparing the meals, it would have been difficult to slip detergent into my food without being caught, which would have ruined their entire plan. Cheryl then dropped another bombshell. The masterminds behind this plot were Oliver and Miguel. They had assured her the plan would work. Hearing this, I couldn't just sit there. Pretending I needed to use the bathroom, I quietly slipped out of the hospital. Initially, I thought about going home to confront my husband and son, but that wouldn't be enough to satisfy me. I decided on a different course of action. I immediately sought out a lawyer after leaving the hospital. Fortunately, it didn't take long to find a law office. I quickly went in and explained my situation. At first, the lawyer was skeptical, but after I played the recording from earlier, his expression changed dramatically. He advised me to contact the police, but I told him there was something else I wanted to do first. We proceeded with the necessary paperwork, and with everything in place except for what I needed from my husband, I set out again, this time with my lawyer. Our next destination was the police station. I began by explaining the whole situation. The police were just as skeptical as the lawyer had been, but as soon as I provided the recording and the lawyer's explanations, they swung into action. Shortly after, a female officer accompanied me back to the hospital, while the lawyer headed to my house with the police. Upon returning to the hospital, Cheryl was still there. The police immediately took her into custody. I felt a brief sense of relief without Cheryl around, but I couldn't fully relax, worried that my husband and son might burst into the hospital room at any moment. I went through cycles of lying down and getting up from the bed, unable to find peace. Eventually, a nurse came to check on me. I had to explain everything, but the conversation distracted me a bit. The nurse was shocked by my story and seemed utterly speechless. She remembered the policewoman and Cheryl leaving earlier and then went back to the nurse's station to process my admission for the day. I can't say how much time had passed, but eventually, a different pair of police officers arrived in my hospital room. Worried that my husband and son had escaped, I anxiously listened to their update, fighting back tears. To my surprise, they informed me that my husband, son, and Cheryl had all been safely arrested. When the police initially entered my home, neither my husband nor my son was present, leading them to suspect they had fled. But in reality, they were just out gambling and were arrested after being questioned by police patrolling the area. I couldn't believe their nerve, gambling while I was being rushed to the hospital. Though they had wished for my health to deteriorate, they should have known I was waking up. Their casual attitude infuriated me, but in the end, their recklessness led to their swift arrest. So I guess there's no use complaining now. Ultimately, my husband, son, and Cheryl were charged with attempted murder. On top of that, my husband was served divorce papers through my lawyer. At first, he opposed the divorce, but after hearing the sum of the damages he owed, he agreed to all my conditions, including transferring the house into my name in exchange for a lower settlement. As for my son and Cheryl, well, with my son in jail, I seized the opportunity to sever all family ties through a legal affidavit. No more financial support, period. Even if he's released, I'll treat him like a complete stranger. As for Cheryl, I informed her parents about everything. Initially, they didn't believe me, but by the time I finished my story, they were visibly shaken and sincerely apologized. Unexpectedly, Cheryl's mother left the room and returned with a thick envelope. Inside was $50,000. I stood there in disbelief as they continued to apologize profusely. It seemed like they intended this as compensation. I tried to decline several times, but they insisted, almost in tears, that I accept it. So I finally did. Time passed, and I found myself in good spirits again. The spacious house, now devoid of people, allowed me to live my life without compromise. And yes, I could finally eat whatever I liked without worrying. Since that incident, I think I've become a bit of a germaphobe. When doing the dishes, I minimize the use of soap. I still think it's a waste of water, but I make sure to thoroughly rinse off any soap. It's not just for dishes. I extend this habit to showering and laundry too. If I don't, I hesitate to even put things in my mouth or on my body. While my husband, son, and Cheryl are certainly to blame for this change, I think I'll gradually get better because they're no longer in my house. I have the freedom to live as I please. Some may think I'm emotionally scared, but from my perspective, I feel utterly relieved and refreshed. I switched to a new cell phone. The incriminating voice recordings have been turned over to the police, and honestly, just keeping that phone would have felt disgusting. As I think about the freedom my new phone represents, I'm motivated to try things I've never dared before. Maybe I'll get into the trending world of cooking live streams. My husband had always dreamed of making it big as a rock musician. Meanwhile, I was managing our living expenses and funding his promotional activities. I even covered $3,000 a month for his father's caregiving costs at his request. Despite all this, there was no sign of him succeeding, and worse, he began slacking off on his music career. Whenever I tried to discuss it with him, he became defensive, insisting that I should just listen to whatever he said. It became increasingly difficult to continue living like this. I decided to at least ask my mother-in-law if she could help with the caregiving expenses. But then 10 years ago, my husband passed away. Right after his death, I discovered his betrayal, which left me devastated. My name is Sadi, and I'm 37 years old. I work for an event company handling a variety of clients. 2 years ago, I married Keith, who is 10 years younger than me. My friends were concerned when I shared the news of our marriage, mostly because of the age difference. I understood their worries, but I was determined to marry him. We're currently living together in an apartment, though we haven't been able to have children yet. When we were dating, everything seemed perfect. We never had big fights and got along so well that I believed our married life would be smooth sailing. Unfortunately, I was in for a rude awakening. Keith was a member of an indie rock band, mostly performing at local venues and regional music festivals. He was dedicated to his music and worked hard to become famous, but he couldn't make a living from the band alone. So he juggled multiple part-time jobs. We met when I volunteered at one of his shows. His passion for music was so inspiring that I felt compelled to support him. Initially, I was cautious because of the age difference and intended to keep things professional. But while managing his band, Keith started making advances towards me. At first, I thought he was joking, but he was serious and openly expressed his feelings. "Sadi, I really like you. Why don't you give me a chance?" I was taken aback by his direct approach. "You're kidding, right? I'm 10 years older than you. Someone like you could easily find a young, pretty girl," I responded. Keith was a wild-looking, handsome guy with a lot of female fans, while I was more of a plain Jane, focused on my work, and had missed the typical age for finding a husband. Not that I was eager to get married anyway, I preferred work over romance. Plus, my older brother has 3 kids, so my parents never pressured me to settle down. I couldn't believe that someone like Keith would have feelings for me, but he persisted. "I don't care about fans who are only interested in my appearance. I prefer mature women like you, who respect and support my dreams and are capable at work. Marry me," he said. His earnestness won me over, and I began to see him as a potential partner. After dating for a while and giving it serious thought, I decided to marry him. I was determined to support his dreams. We didn't have enough money for a wedding, so we had a simple ceremony at the city hall. After that, Keith moved into my apartment and we started our life together. My parents lived on the opposite side of the country, and we couldn't afford to visit them. We planned to visit each other's families once we were more financially stable. But shortly after our wedding, Keith wanted to discuss something with me. My dad was paralyzed in an accident a while back, and he needs constant care. Unfortunately, I can't go back often, and my mom is getting old and can't move around much either. "Oh no, that sounds really tough," I said, feeling concerned. "Is there something I can do to help?" Keith looked at me hesitantly. "Yeah, actually, his care costs $3,000 a month. I've been cutting corners to make ends meet, but I'm reaching my limit. I'm really sorry, but honey, could you pitch in a $3,000 each month?" I was taken aback by his request. My take-home salary was only about $3,000, and Keith made around $1,500. If I sent my entire salary each month, we'd barely have enough left for rent. Sensing my hesitation, he suddenly grabbed my hand. "Honey, I'm really counting on you. My parents have been supporting my dream for so long, and doing nothing about this wouldn't sit right with me. I'll work hard to become famous, I promise. Please?" At his desperate plea, I decided to tough it out. "All right, but if it comes out of my income, we won't be able to sustain ourselves. So for now, I'll use my savings. You've got to pay it back sometime, though." "Thanks, love. I'll definitely pay it back. Heck, if I make it big, I'll spoil you rotten." Just to be safe, I made him sign a promissory note. Even though we were married, I thought it would be better to handle these things properly. Paying $3,000 a month hurt, but I tried to remind myself that it was for a good cause. I just hoped his band would become famous soon. Unfortunately, things didn't go as I'd hoped. 2 years later, there was still no progress. Not only that, but Keith had stopped promoting his band altogether. They didn't even get together to practice anymore. He spent most of his time lounging at home or using the pocket money I gave him to go out. At first, I thought he might have given up on his dream. "If you're not continuing with music, you need to find another job," I told him one day. When I asked if he had given up, he insisted he was still pursuing his music career. But despite his words, there was no sign of him restarting band activities. One day, I couldn't take it anymore and confronted him. "Hey, can't you just get back into playing shows already? Or at least try some part-time jobs, even short-term? It could be a fresh start, you know." "Yeah, maybe when I'm in the mood," he replied casually. "You said that last time, but you've just been chilling without working. If you keep going like this, we're going to be in serious trouble. Just earn a little something for God's sake." His nonchalant attitude ticked me off, and I unintentionally raised my voice. He glared at me and got defensive. "Shut up. Don't you dare complain about men's work. I'm just taking a break because I'm in a slump. I'll get back to it when the time is right." I was stunned by his sudden outburst. He had never been so nasty to me since we got married. But his lack of work was seriously messing up our finances. My savings were dwindling because of the monthly caregiving expense for my father-in-law. Our life was on the brink of falling apart. I tried discussing the possibility of reducing the amount I sent each month. "We're barely afloat, Keith. We can't sustain our life on just my income." "Cut down the amount? That'll make my dad suffer and make life harder for my mom." Are you planning to abandon my parents? It's not like that at all, but we're running out of money. We have to make some changes. Figuring that out is your job as my wife, he snapped. Reducing the amount is absolutely out of the question. If there's not enough money, go get a part-time job or something. He furiously stormed back to his room after that argument, leaving me at a loss about how to deal with his absurd demands. Unfortunately, his troublesome behavior didn't end there. Lately, he's been going out with friends and coming back extremely late. It's not uncommon for him to return in the dead of night, or sometimes he doesn't even contact me and just shows up in the morning. When he does return home, he reeks of alcohol and perfume. When I asked him where he'd been, he casually said he was just out playing around and drinking at bars. Okay, if it's just you drinking too much, I can understand the alcohol smell, I told him. But what's with the strong scent of perfume? I asked him to at least let me know where he was going, but he refused to listen. Don't complain about my hangouts with my buddies. I just happened to get that perfume smell at the bar. Don't go jumping to conclusions, he snapped. However, his eyes were darting all over the place and he was sweating, so it was crystal clear he was lying. He used to be sweet when we first got married, but now there wasn't a trace of that left. In fact, I felt like he was treating me more like a cash cow than anything else. Divorce began to cross my mind, but there was also the matter of the caregiving fees I'd been paying. I still had the promissory note, but I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get that money back after the divorce. With no other option, I decided to consult with my in-laws. While Keith was away, I made up my mind to call them. When I cleaned his room, I found an old-school notebook with phone numbers written in it. Something about it made a strong impression on me. While he was out, I went into his room and dialed one of the numbers written in the notebook. A woman's voice answered. Hello, who is this? Oh, hi, this is Sadie. You don't know me. Is this Mrs. Florence, Keith's mother? Yes, she replied, sounding surprised. I explained to her that I was his wife. She was shocked because she hadn't heard from him in years. I never thought he could get married, she said. He's lazy and always talked about becoming a rock star. I'm really sorry for the delayed update, I said, feeling guilty. He was earnest in pursuing me, and well, I'm quite a bit older than him. I blurted that out as if making an excuse. Then, I brought up the issue of caregiving expenses. He asked me to pay $3,000 each month for his father's care. But because he's not working, my savings are about to run out. Is it okay to reduce the amount? There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Then, before I could sense what was coming, she dropped a bombshell on me. My husband, he passed away 10 years ago. Keith has been estranged from the family for years, and we haven't been in touch. What? I stammered. His father is gone, and he's been estranged? I'm sorry, could you please explain a bit more? As we talked, one shocking truth after another came to light. I realized I had been deceived by him all this time. My entire body trembled with rage. All the effort I had put into supporting his dream had been for nothing. I would not let him get away with this. I was determined to make him pay for what he'd done. A few days after my call with my mother-in-law, Keith was out late again. Normally, I would have been worried about where he'd been, but now I felt relieved because I wasn't interrupted in my preparations. When he finally returned, just as I finished my task, he widened his eyes as he looked around the room. Then he started yelling at me. Hey, what the heck are you doing? Don't touch my stuff without permission. I stared at him coldly. You need to get out of this apartment and we're getting a divorce. You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon. What the heck? You can't just say that out of the blue. What do you think you're doing? He shouted. I know exactly what I'm doing, but do you? What have you done with the $3,000 I've been paying every month for your dad's care, which you lied about? He froze at my question, so I continued without giving him a chance to speak. I contacted your mom. She told me about your dad's passing and how you've been estranged from the family for years because of repeated misdemeanors like shoplifting. His face turned pale, and he desperately tried to come up with an excuse. No, it's not like that at all. I was buying band equipment. It was pricey, so I was hesitant to tell you. It's for work, so it's fine, right? I was disgusted by his pathetic excuse. Even if that were true, the fact remained that he lied and deceitfully took money from me each month, and especially because it was all built on lies. There was no way I could forgive him. I'm not up for vague excuses. You used the money I gave you on your affairs, right? I've got proof, and it's all been checked. His notebook had listed a bunch of women's phone numbers, and when I called them, 5 of them confirmed they were romantically involved with him. They had all been lied to about him being single. When I confronted him with this, his face turned red as a beet, and he became enraged. He even tried to attack me, but at that moment, a sharp scream came from the back room. Enough! Out poured a bunch of women, his mistresses, all of whom I had gathered. The color drained from his face as he went from red to white in a second. They looked ready to unleash hell, especially since some of them had been seriously considering marriage. They pounced on him, shouting, "You jerk! And you scumbag!" as they towered over the cowering Keith. Outnumbered and fueled by anger, they were a force to be reckoned with. Amid the chaos, Keith was grappling and crying out, "Please stop. I messed up, I'm sorry." Once they had enough of him, each of them spat out, "I'll never forgive you," and were done, before storming out one by one. He was left in a sorry state, completely stunned. I laid it on even thicker. "Just so you know, I'm demanding alimony for the infidelity, and you're paying back the $70,000 I've paid in caregiving expenses. I've got the paperwork, so there's no running away." He suddenly looked at me and begged on his knees. "Please, honey, don't divorce me. I'll pay back the money over time, and I'll change my ways and work seriously. Please, don't leave me." His pleas fell on deaf ears. At this point, I felt nothing but annoyance. "Are you kidding me? After lying and stealing money from me, you're saying this now? Using your deceased father as an excuse is despicable. Now I understand exactly why your mom disowned you." "Please don't say that. I'm really remorseful," he pleaded. "It's too late for me to believe that now. I never want to see your face again. I'll contact you through my lawyer, so get the heck out of my apartment right now. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." I kicked him out right then and there. After that, I successfully divorced Keith and collected the money he deceitfully took from me, along with alimony through my lawyer. When I threatened to fight in court if he didn't pay, he quickly transferred the full amount into my account. It seemed he had racked up some debts somewhere. Moreover, he had scammed 2 out of the 5 women he had an affair with. They came after him too, but he couldn't afford any more debts. He turned to his estranged mother for help, begging for mercy. I heard that even though she had disowned him, she didn't want him causing trouble for others, so she forced him to pay them back. In return, she sent him to work day and night on a deep-sea fishing boat owned by a relative until he paid off his debts. He's probably getting tossed around in rough waters and being worked rigorously right about now. On the other hand, I got my money back plus alimony, so I'm living a carefree single life. I'm hoping to meet someone sincere next time around.